And welcome back. It's now 12 minutes away from 7 o'clock, and as promised before the break, we're sitting down to talk about Pat the Great Cat Literacy Project. And joining us for this conversation, we have Barbara Tumalapalli, we have Dr. Bart Harmsen, and Jamal Andrewin from the Belize Zoo. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good
morning.
Thank you.
For having us.
Thank you for having us.
Now, for people who have not heard of Pat the Great Cat, let's talk about the project, its genesis, and where we are in its evolution.
Okay. Pat the Great Cat was begun in 2010, actually. It was the idea of someone from Milwaukee. Her name is Nancy Kennedy, and she had this wonderful idea that we should perhaps use the story of Pat, a jaguar that went from Belize to Milwaukee, that she wanted to use it to bring our children together in some form. And she thought, if we get this story about this real jaguar out into the schools, perhaps somehow we could inspire their imaginations and have them write about it. So she put a project together where she would go out into the Milwaukee schools, and then she came to Belize and asked me if we would help collaborate with them. And we took this story to the children in Belize through a number of schools, and also in Milwaukee. And we told the kids the story, and they produced a lot of material. They wrote things, and they drew lots of pictures, and made masks, and did research on jaguars. And then that was what was turned into this wonderful book called Pat the Great Cat, A Jaguar's Journey. The children, after doing this wonderful work, the book was published in 2011 in September, and they had a launch in Milwaukee, and then we had a launch here in Belize at our residence up in Belmopan. Following that, it decided that we wanted to do something with this wonderful book because it's from Belize, its heart is in Belize, it's inspired from here, and half of the book was written by children from here. And so I decided to turn it into a literacy project where we could help take the book somehow into the schools. Since then, we've raised funds to bring in 10,000 books to Belize, and I know, William, you were there at our opening when the books arrived here. It was a wonderful occasion. And now we're also working on teacher training, because it's no good just to have books around. You have to also know how to use them. And lots of people have ideas on how to use them, but there's some great research-based ideas on how to use such a literature, a piece of literature, to teach kids about reading and so forth.
Now, let's go back to some of the basics. Obviously, this story is one that both Nancy, you said, from Milwaukee,
Yes.
and yourself felt was one that had to be told. Not just to be able to share experiences, but one that had to be told. What is the story of Pat the Cat?
So Pat the Great Cat was this young jaguar that played around in Honey Camp Lagoon up in the north part of Belize until he got really hungry, and people were moving into his neighborhood, which were farmers and so forth. So instead of just eating the usual peccary and the usual animals that the jaguars like to eat, he couldn't find any more because they were scattering, because they were turning them into farms. So he started eating cattle, as
which no
jaguars
farmer likes.
likes. No. And so the farmer said, okay, this is enough. And so luckily, instead of killing him, which sometimes happens and is very tragic, which is part of this story, they captured him in a cage and brought him to the Belize Zoo, which is where Belize Zoo comes in. And the Belize Zoo took care of him for a couple of years, and then they have this wonderful jaguar rehabilitation program, which helps to calm the jaguars down and so forth. And then he was sent up to Milwaukee because they needed a jaguar for their red jaguar species survival program. And it's always good to have new blood coming in, and so Pat was going to be one of those jaguars that brings new blood into the whole system up in the zoos. What's wonderful about the story then was they took it and we've turned it into this story, which the kids actually really enjoyed. And I remember going to some of the class, and the kids were like, me, what can I do to help save the jaguars? And this is the whole point of it, to not only save the jaguars, but to understand this balance that we have to all, and that's where Panthera organization comes in. They're doing this wonderful research on jaguars, and they're going to talk about that a little later.
Now, I think one of the fascinating things about this story, and from your introduction, obviously I understand that this was told to the children as well, the fact that the explanation of the change in the habitat of the jaguar was most important in being able to, it wasn't just a jaguar who's eating cattle, it was a jaguar whose home was disturbed. How receptive were the children to that information?
I think they understood it. Not that many of them have seen jaguars. Even in Belize, a lot of the kids said, some of them say, yeah, I saw a jaguar, but then they're saying, no, I didn't really see a jaguar. But we know there are prints there, we know there's scat, and Bart will, of course, be able to say a little more about the presence of jaguars, especially in Belize. There's good concentration, and how, not only that, but how important it is to the whole ecological system of taking care of your environment. So we have to try and protect these amazing animals because it's part of our balance in nature, and we know we're all trying to have balance, and we know that in North America they're practically extinct now, whereas the jaguar used to roam all the way from North America down right to Central and South America. So you have such a unique opportunity here in Belize to tell the story about these amazing animals that are here, and that's part of what is so beautiful about the book. And the kids understand this, and so they were like ready to do all this work on it.
How much of it also includes scientific research that isn't methodological in its approach, but actually factual in terms of a cross-curricular approach to teaching some science through the reading of this book?
In the book, this book actually went to the Panthera office in New York, and they checked it for factual facts, sort of like what's right about jaguar ecology and what's not. And so it went actually through an editing phase in that, sort of like saying like, that's, I would change that because that's not completely true, and that's a good.
But how do you do that with children's story? Because their understanding of what's been told sometimes is a bit different. Did it require heavy editing?
No, I think it was actually sort of like, it just required sort of like, if they probably, in terms of their...
The paw prints are the ones that are the jaguar facts that the kids looked up, and kids did research also on the internet and stuff probably that Panthera has produced and so forth. And then Panthera checked all the jaguar facts because we wanted to make sure it's correct. And so they did this wonderful job of making sure it's correct. So throughout the book, the paw prints are all the jaguar facts, and the others are just little thought bubbles, which could be or may not be true, where the children have little speech bubbles, and they, like here, there's a speech bubble, and there's a difference between the speech bubble and the jaguar fact. And so it really helps that we've had real scientific research-based information in here, and it's not just made up.
Now, in terms of why was that such an important factor to the composition of the book?
I think it's very important that, of course, when you want to reach out to children, you have to give them the right information. They have to be, in the end, it has to be entertaining for them. It has to be moving for them. The story is a moving story in many ways, but in that, it's good that they learn things about jaguars. And in this case, there's lots of facts in there, which probably adults as well will find sort of like, oh, I didn't know that about jaguars, that they were like that. And so in that sense, it's good that that information is in there in a nice, concise manner, written down with a nice story next to that. And that's always, if as an organization like Panthera, you can contribute to that, that's a very good thing. And in this case, it's also the University of Belize that has been part of it, because I'm part of the University of Belize, of the Environmental Research Institute. And so this is a good coming together of different organizations for the same goal. And this book is...
Now, Jamal. Let's talk about the Belize Zoo and what this partnership has done for you all. In truth, most Belizeans, and I'm not just saying children and adults, their first exposure to jaguars is at the Belize Zoo.
Right.
If you're lucky enough to see them in the cage or through the rehab program. Right. What has the partnership been like for you all?
Well, partnering with Panthera and Miss Barbara and Miss Nancy, all these people that came together through the Pat the Great Cat project, just kind of, it's just been a phenomenal plus to whatever Sharon and the rest of the keepers had envisioned when they started the problem jaguar rehab program. I mean, the primary objective was to save these cats from being shot and then using them to somehow promote the conservation of their own species now that they're no longer safe to be left in the wild, right? And the main two objectives before were send these cats to other zoos, as Ms. Barbara mentioned, as part of the jaguar species survival program. They have a fantastic source of genetics that they can contribute to the captive populations in the US, right? And the other avenue, of course, is education. We do have jaguars at the zoo that we use for interactive sessions, like you may have seen.
Like Junior Buddy.
Like Junior Buddy, right. Actually, he was an offset of the program as well, another plus in his own right, because his mom was actually a problem jaguar.
Okay.
But other jaguars, unlike Pat, that may not have been, been able to be sent to other zoos, we use them for education on site. But using, in all aspects of it, having them kind of saving them from being shot, using them for education, and also having them contribute fresh genetics, and then having these kind of offsets come from it. Them having young in the other zoos, which is the primary objective, right? Or even the literacy projects that can come out of it, kind of making it a cultural and ecological benefit out of rescuing these cats.
Now, this project has been going for a year, just about. 2 years, okay. 2 years. And you mentioned something so important from the beginning. I'm the only one around here who doesn't know in detail the Great Cat story.
Right.
But how Pat was saved is the ideal. You don't want farmers to be able to shoot problem jaguars.
Right.
Have you seen any change in behavior? Have you had more people come out to you and say, well, there's this jaguar, I don't want to kill it, but it's really destroying my farm? Yeah?
Right. So the literacy program, as Ms. Barbara mentioned, has been going on since about a year or two, right? But the problem jaguar program started way back in 2003, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And the concept was that we go out and do education work and ask them, rather than shooting the cat, please call forestry or call the zoo and we'll take it completely off your hands. And we have passed, I think it's more than 10 jaguars through the program.
Wow.
Some of them still on site at the zoo, but others we sent off, like Pat. And there's one in the Philadelphia Zoo in the US called Frankie, who's been renamed Jutai. He was another one that we sent off. So yeah, you do get more calls. And also actually working with Panthera, we kind of, Bart's one of his colleagues, Jasmine Ramos, leasing out of UB, he's Panthera's go-to guy for the corridor. So he responds to a lot of the problem jaguar conflicts. Yeah. So, he kind of helps us offset the amount of them that would be funneled to the zoo, because they may not necessarily, they may just see one near the area and say, he's going to hunt my cattle. But they're not always a threat. So, but the ones that are, we do get a lot more response of people calling, say, I really don't want to shoot this cat. Can you guys help me out? It's
Do people still try catching them on their own?
I think in a couple cases they have. You get there, they call, they say, we don't catch it. So, you just have to come pick it up.
Because sometimes that causes as much damage, no?
Right.
It depends on how they do it.
Yeah. It's the problem is actually very big.
Yeah.
It's way bigger than the 10 cats. I think at this very moment, if you would think how many cats are out there that are problem cats, the zoo could easily take about 30 or 40 right at this moment.
Wow. Now,
and the problem is very big, and that's why this kind of education is very vital, and it requires something else than just a captive component.
Right.
Problem cat is defined as what? Just simply
a problem jaguar would be a jaguar that enters communities and hunts livestock or domesticated animals, so prey items that it shouldn't hunt naturally.
Okay.
And what we've found with the ones that we have at the zoo, all of them have almost always been damaged in some way. They've been shot. Ironically, you find them with their pellets embedded in their bodies, teeth missing, their vision's going. There's always something wrong with them. Junior's mother, her whole body was completely covered in botflies beeforms. So something that kind of weakens their physical stamina and makes them unable to compete with other normal healthy cats, right?
So they go for the easier prey.
Right, exactly.
Now, I wanted to ask, because obviously driving to Belmopan, you have the signs on the side of the road. What do you want people to think when they see that? Just read it and go like, that's cool, or what do you want them to think?
I think the one thing that is the important part about that is that people need to realize that when they drive across the road, that it's not just, I'm driving along the road. I'm actually driving through an area that these cats inhabit. They're there. They're crossing the roads. There is, not too long ago, I think it was on Facebook, There's a picture, right?
Amazing. The one walking across the road.
A young jaguar. That was Broadway, right?
And it's actually, that spot right there is an important crossing. Right there, that's where cats cross the road regularly. It's another one very close to the zoo. That's where they cross. And this is where, for example, the research of very soon to be Dr. Omar Figueroa, his research has actually contributed to that, knowing where these spots are. And now we're just seeing that's a very important stretch for jaguars to get to the north of the area, from the Rio Bravo, from the Maya Mountains. And that corridor is vital for wildlife. And that's what we want people to know, that that's an important part.
And also that it's cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
I want to take that picture for myself. I do.
I don't know about that. I'll probably just...
I just wanted to show you a picture here, then, just to show you how real this animal is. This is Pat, once he'd gone to Milwaukee, and this is Sharon Matola when she went to visit him some months or so later after he'd gone up there. And he recognized her, and there's an actual photograph of this, but we included it in this book to show you how real these jaguars are, that they know people, that they understand. They're so intelligent.
Wow.
And
do they form strong bonds like the pets that we keep?
With their caregivers?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yes.
And the caregivers
that
seem to
reflects
make
it.
noises.
I mean, normally, he didn't recognize Sharon just for being his, the person who gives him meat. He's the one that he recognizes as his primary caregiver. I used to torture him with the guitar and stuff like that.
Torture him with the guitar. I think, Sharon, you're going straight to the office.
I do want to say they make horrible pets, so don't.
No, I don't want to encourage anybody.
When they're about this big, they're cute. And when they get about this big, they're a nightmare. And when they get about this big, they're dangerous.
No, we don't want to encourage that at all.
Now, we know that also it's a bilingual
Yes,
book.
it's a bilingual book. It has Spanish and English. Spanish is in smaller text, but it's great for teaching either language. And what's great about the book is that you can use it for, the important part for us is that you can use it to encourage kids to read. And that's the trick of the whole thing is, what are we going to use this book for? So it's for reading, and also it has cross-curricular applications. So, for example, we've got lessons that have come out of here that are built on math or science, history, geography. There's a whole lot of lessons that teachers can use this book to teach, and so that's why it's important, because now we're trying to take the books out once we distribute them into the countryside. So hopefully there'll be a lot more jaguar education going on in this next year.
Yeah.
And we're using teacher training so that teachers will know how to use this book and how to show their kids to use the book very effectively in these lessons.
What type of skills are you talking about? Is it just being able to help the children interpret what they're reading, or?
It's not only interpreting, it's a lot more. It's learning how to read means you're showing the children how to read. First you model. Then they see you doing it. Even the littlest kids, they don't have to actually know how to read the books. You're showing them how you read. Then you take their words and say, kids, what do you think of this story? Can you recite back to me what you heard? So even a 3, 4, 5, 10-year-old, whoever it is, they can tell you what they heard and what they remember, and you're guiding them along. So there's things called guided reading that you're trying to teach the children, and then you write their words, and they can see how powerful and important their ideas and their words are. And this is part of teaching the real way of reading. It's research-based reading, so it's not just saying, oh, learn this word, learn that word. There's so many research-based techniques now that teachers could use, and that we're trying to help introduce in the schools in case the teachers have not had a chance to go through teacher training. That's why it was so critical for me to then turn this into this, have teacher training workshops all around Belize, teach the kids how to use the book and to do research and also to express themselves. And it's all based from Belize, so it's fabulous. And once we get it across the U.S. as well and all around the world, we're hoping that it'll work. And I'm sure lots of teachers, everybody we've showed it to or introduced it to, they've been so excited.
Now, we're getting ready to wrap, but we know you had an announcement.
Yes.
Very important,
We have
right?
a very important
So we were saving it
announcement.
for the last.
And I just wanted to say we thank all the many collaborators who've collaborated with us on this project. There have been many, many besides Panthera, the Belize Zoo, Delta Airlines, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Of course, the Ministry of Education has been critical in helping us turn this into a great project here in Belize. and they've allowed it to be used as supplementary text. So I just wanted to mention that. But the exciting news is that we have a winner, I know Jamal was on our panel that decided there were like 28 names we had to choose from. And the winner for the cub naming contest, because this wonderful cat, Pat, who was at the Belize Zoo, at Milwaukee Zoo, has had cubs. And there were 2 cubs. The Milwaukee children now have named 1 cub, and the Belizean kids have named the other. And this morning in Milwaukee, they're going to have a press conference telling the names, but we're going to have the first name.
That's Mama and the cubs there?
Yeah,
yes, that's Stella and her 2 cubs. So one of those cubs is going to be named, what's the name?
What's the name? Let's hear it.
Should I say it?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
All right, the Belizean named cub, his name's going to be Zian.
Zian.
Ooh.
Or Belizean, because they wanted to have a name that encompassed all of the different cultures of Belize. So we had all these many different wonderful names that were put forward. But Zian seems short, easy to use, and also it encompasses the whole of Belize.
Yeah.
And
because there were a lot of fantastic like Maya names, even some Garifuna submissions, but we just decided since Zian comes from Belizean, it covers all the cultures in Belize, not
covered
just
all the different cultures.
Mayan and so on.
And then the runner-up was Anahish.
I think
it's Anahish because apparently it's supposed to be Anahish in Kekchi. But the children decided, the kids in America are not going to be able to pronounce the glottal Anahish, and so they turned it into Anahish. So that was the runner-up. It was close tied.
And what did that mean?
Yellow cat, I think.
Yellow jaguar.
Or yellow, yeah.
Anahish.
Ish is jaguar and catchy.
Yeah.
The only word I know.
So that's a big thing.
In case they yell it, right?
So a little student in Grace Primary School, I understand, is the one who named the winner, which was Zian.
Excellent. And so the prize is he or she goes to Milwaukee and sees the cub for himself.
So we're going to give away some cash prizes and each district we're having a winner and a runner-up.
What's the name of the person from Grace Primary? The winner? Do we know?
Yes, I had it.
Okay, we'll say it at the end of the show. That's not a problem.
We'll give it to you at the end of the show, and you can.
My final question has to do with the book. If it's available for sale, is it only going to be used exclusively for school?
No, the 10,000 copies I brought down were donated, and so those are going to all the schools. Standard 4 classes are going to get 30 books each.
Okay.
We're just waiting for boxes to come so that I can give it out, and they have somewhere to keep the books while they're being used, so they can be used for many years. But they can also be bought here by the Added Touch. Mrs. Robin McCutcheon is selling them around the country, so hopefully if people need to buy them, they can buy them through there.
Excellent.
All right.
Well, we want to thank you all for sitting down and educating us about Pat the Great Cat and encouraging people to read the book. In Espanol también.
Pat's a very famous cat. That's such a great cat. But thank you once again for joining us.
My pleasure.
We're gonna go ahead now and take a break. When we come back, we'll have fun facts from familiar faces and also a conversation about gender and health. So stay tuned.